All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, normally it's a Wheel of Time day, but we are going to go the social episode we missed because we wanted more time to really get into Ishii. And sorry for the list that I took 2 years to recover to train out of when I was 9 years old. But this is the one time. Yeah, there you go, everybody. We're working with a retainer. Yeah. You say you're from Lavernia without saying you're from Lavernia, right? Uh, it's
Cletus, the slack-jawed yokel.
So I am getting better at talking with it, but just bear with me for a few weeks. And by the time I'm good at it, I'll have a new tooth and I won't have to worry about it. But uh, no, we're going to talk about the Super Bowl. We got cultural and sports related discussion there. We're going to talk about we're going to go sexy time with Sam with the talking about the it and friend zones and things like that. And then for a little bit of political, we got some Fauci being charged by the states, so the presidential pardon doesn't matter in those situations.
Mhm.
So we might go into that a little bit, and because a lot of people are like off with his head, but at the same time, I'm actually more curious about. I want him to be charged to find out who was behind him.
Mhm.
I want to see
Mhm.
how far this goes.
Yeah, that's what Doge at USA, that is why USAID was such a perfect first target because you're going to get so much pushback and blowback if you start with entitlements, which are the big looming disaster debt bomb for the deficit and the debt, but you can't start there because everyone will freak out and you'll get too much pushback. But if you start with, you know, trans comic books in Peru
Or
and,
Sesame Street in Iraq.
that one to me is a big deal because of how much money it was, 20
Mhm.
million for that. But
Or
if
the
you
or the Politico subscriptions, $8 million.
yes,
That funded the whole organization of Politico. $8 million is
but
basically the whole organization.
there's someone on X called Data Republican that has been doing the kinds of deep dives on this that Ethical Skeptic did with the Comikoff. And not just so it's one thing to say, hey, this much money went to this thing. But what Data Republican is doing is, yeah, but how did it get there? Because that's important. Because how many pass throughs were there? How many different quote unquote NGOs, which I don't remember who I saw point this out of, hey, if your NGO, your non governmental organization, nonprofit, is going to go out of business, use that word purposely, because you lose your government funding, you weren't actually a non governmental organization, were
Mm.
you? So the pass throughs are what's really important because how many people are getting their cut? So, how many people are invested in what is essentially a giant money laundering scheme? But anyway, we'll get to that. Um, I think for all the reasons we talked about going into it, I'll just very briefly get on my soapbox for why sports are important and thus why the postmodernists, radical Marxists, have been going so hard after sports for so long because it is one of the few true meritocracies left standing.
hmm Which is why I hated the whole Kaepernick situation because it's like if anybody understands meritocracy, it is somebody who competes in sports.
Yeah, dude, you're not getting you're not on the bench because of your activism. You were already on the bench because you sucked at
Did I lose you? Hello?
Kaepernick became an activist after you got benched, which there's a lesson there. There's a, how many parallels can we draw in society, in politics, in business of, oh, I didn't get what I wanted. Now I'm going to become an activist and pressure and preamble to what we're going to talk about with Candace on trigonometry, shame you into getting what I want.
Yeah, well, don't downplay the corporate interest too, because Nike
Mhm.
funded him before he kneeled. that was a marketing campaign from the beginning. And so just so happens that these companies do that when they have slave labor overseas and they don't want you to
Oh.
look. Yeah, it's amazing. Like when Mars made the trans M&M, and it was right when the story came out that they were using slave labor in Africa to pick their cocoa. So,
Mhm.
amazing how that works. The ESG score and all of those little components.
Um, but the game itself is a great illustration of why meritocracy matters. Because you were making this point to your niece about why are they so bad? Well, the Chiefs weren't bad. They were probably this year, and the last couple of years, they've been trending down. A above average team. Okay, well, an above average team doesn't make it to the Super Bowl. You
Hmm.
can make it to the playoffs, but then when the competition gets stiffer and you're all getting closer to that goal you've all been fighting for the whole season, and so you're going to play at your best, at your most emotional, it's going to get winnowed out, right?
Hmm.
As good as the Lions were, you have to wonder, is Goff actually the guy when in the biggest game he got beat up. He got taken advantage of.
Which, having been kind of a Lions fan as a kid when Barry Sanders was playing
Mm-hmm.
and the good years there, you should be used to it because we had Scott Mitchell, the Pro Bowl, Pro Bowl, Pro Bowl, first game of the playoffs, 5 interceptions
Mm-hmm.
every freaking year.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to the point where you'd be 4th and 25, and it's like just hand bury the ball. Just that's the
And
best.
sometimes he does something.
Yeah.
Um, but the NFL really shot itself in the foot here because it was, and you talked about this. So in the pregame and even during the game when it was very early on starting to look like a blowout, they kept trying to keep you interested with reminding you how many games. It was like 7 or 8 where the Chiefs had a fourth quarter comeback to win a game. That they won a very significant number of their games were one score games. Okay, but how many of those drives were enabled by what we would call at best a very questionable flag,
Hmm.
right? And it was, you don't have to put on too big a tinfoil hat to look at and say, yeah, the league and the networks very obviously had a rooting interest in keeping the Chiefs alive, in making them a story, in getting them to the big game, not just because of the Taylor Swift crap, but also Mahomes is a big star. He's on every commercial ever,
Hmm.
right? He is one of the most recognizable stars in the NFL right now. So they had a vested financial interest in keeping him going. But then look what your end product was, because you propped them up for so long. When they finally got against a team that was not messing around and was a good team and a good roster, that was the most boring Super Bowl since the Broncos got blown out by Seattle.
Oh yeah. Well, I made it interesting by betting on it, and that was the only
Yeah,
reason I
yeah.
was interested, really,
That,
because
that that was what we were paying attention to very quickly, because by the end of this first half, it was. I mean, for anyone who didn't watch this, the final score was 40-22, which is already a blowout. But then when you consider the game wasn't that close,
no.
ooh, that's ugly.
Yeah.
That's an ugly score.
Yeah, those were what we call trash can points at the end, where the game's already done.
Yeah,
So people are just going in for individual
you
stuff,
you
you
threw a
know.
70-yard bomb TD to Worthy. Cool. Now we got the ball back and we're going to grind it out, and
Hmm.
you're going to get the ball back 5 minutes later.
Hmm.
With 5 minutes of clock run off. Good luck. So the game was already done. And it wasn't even close.
Well, but this
Uh,
this actually is reflective of something I said during post November and when the election happened. The thing about the Chiefs was, I mean, it was very obvious. One of these teams doesn't belong here.
mhm, mhm.
And what we had was, and this is what was pissing everybody off because it was so obvious, because they weren't great, because we could tell they didn't belong from game 4 in the season. They tried to propagandize a team to a championship and 2 sales, but the country was done with it.
Yeah.
Whereas a grassroots movement, which is just a team trying to win, came up from Philadelphia and blew them out. It was the meme versus propaganda. We had something trying to be propped up versus something that propped itself up. And it just at the stage it was at, they could only do so much from a officiating standpoint because everybody was watching and everybody was on it. I mean, that's the entire press cycle before the game was questions about, hey, do you think those calls went your way, or and all the Chiefs players were getting mad. Yeah, you know what? You could be mad because you might not have anything to do with it,
Yeah.
but you still can be mad and accept it at the same
Well,
time.
and there's also, yeah, you can get a call go your way to help you out, but then you still have to make the drive. You still have to finish
Mhm.
that drive. So there is an element of, hey, even, bad calls go both ways. Well, people have crunched the numbers and they don't against the Chiefs, but there is also a case to be made of, hey, even if you get a favorable call that goes your way, you still have to execute the play. They don't just hand you a touchdown. And there's an element of truth to that. But
But
if you
if you
start
get
piling
bailouts
that
on
up,
times you don't execute,
exactly.
is when it comes in because these are all professionals. The actual difference between the worst NFL team and the best is a couple calls from a win
Hmm. Hmm.
because these are all professionals being paid lots of money to be really good, selected as the best from a very robust farm system going through high school, then college, and then on. And what is it? What 140 NCAA teams? And that's just
It's something. It used to be like 120 in Division One, and I think it's more now. Yeah, so it's
yeah. So
it's a
and that's
lot.
just Division One, and we got D2 players because they couldn't score high on an SAT. That wasn't Terrell Owens was one of those. So where
Yeah,
he's
McNair.
basically a Hall of Fame player that came because he couldn't score well on an SAT, right? So we have a farm system that's immense. Baseball is even bigger, and it's just you're getting the best talent in the world and you're codifying it down to 32 teams with a salary cap. So you can only spend so much money and you can't stack your team. So it's yeah, where teams go wrong is where they mismanage that. But the difference between the best and the worst, I always hate when they look at a bad team. They said this about the Browns a year ago. They're like, "Oh, a college team could beat them." It's like, no, it can't because these are the best college players from around the country on
Yes.
one team. They would destroy that college team.
Even a team like Alabama that might get half a dozen guys drafted. Well, that's still six
Hmm.
out of out of the 22 on offensive
Starters,
starters on offensive
yeah.
defense. But then you've got all that bench, the guys that are role players, your nickel linebackers or nickel corners and whatever that come in and out and are integral to that kind of thing.
Hmm. A
So
lot,
it's nonsense.
most teams, and we saw that with the Texans this year. Cowboys is a good example. Most teams are one or two injuries away from being a contender.
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah, the Panthers, they looked like they were going to go 0-17, and then uh, Dalton Dalton comes in as the quarterback, and for a
Mhm.
couple of games, it's like, wait, are they going to turn this around and be contenders in what it was one of the more open divisions, the NFC South? And no, they fell off the wagon again. But for a second there, it was like, oh, maybe they're not historically terrible. No, that turned out to be the Browns again,
Well,
which
and
I'm so
that
glad I drafted their defense. Oh, you
and the
moron.
point about propagandizing versus memeing, a team comes up and they're good. If it was just that the Chiefs were great, it would have been like the Patriots a decade ago,
Hmm.
where everybody kind of hates on them, but they're like, yeah, but they're really freaking good.
Yeah.
And Belichick's a Hall of Famer. Brady's going to be in the Hall of Fame. Gronk is everybody talks about Kelsey now. Gronk blows Kelsey away when it comes to playing tight
Hmm.
end,
Hmm.
and so it was this thing that you wanted to complain about it, but you kind of half-heartedly complained
Yeah.
about because
Well,
you just didn't want to see it again. You started to get bored,
one of
but
the more egregious ones that people talk about, the Kansas City home cooking kind of thing was the infamous tuck rule. Okay, well, yeah, but then they still had to go out. That was that helped them get that win over the Raiders. But then they still had to go out and win one or two more games just to get to the Super Bowl.
No, that
And
was
then they
that
had
was
to,
the AFC Championship
okay,
against
I
the
couldn't remember
Raiders.
if that was
Yeah, yeah.
divisional or the championship. But then they started to go out and beat the greatest show on turf, widely considered the best offense ever in in the in the St. Louis Rams. And they did. I mean, that was a huge upset at the time. People forget because then they went on a 20-year historic run. But that Super Bowl, they were huge underdogs.
Yeah, and so even to take it another step forward about the hate, quote unquote, there's a lot of people. Clifton Duncan, who I usually respect what he's talking about, is it's been big on this
Yeah.
about the Taylor Swift booing and stuff, that it wasn't good for. And I'm like, no, if you're saying it for they booed because she backed Biden. They didn't boo because she backed Biden, or at least most of them. They booed because we're tired of
They're
getting
Philly
this.
fans. They threw batteries at Santa. I mean,
Yeah,
as a veteran of the war on Christmas, that was the opening shot.
but I'm saying as far as NFL fans, one of the things we've been complaining about is quit showing shots of her when we're trying to watch the damn
It,
game.
we have been saying that, you and me, I don't know how many other people, but us angry old men have been yelling at the clouds for years of that is every Super Bowl or not even Super Bowl, because now they do it, especially when they're in LA at a Rams game or a Chargers game. And it's like, I don't care about the celebrities in the stands. I'm
Mhm.
watching the game.
Yeah, Jack Nicholson with the Lakers that is the same. You know, him with his crazy hair because he's a wacko in real life
Hmm.
and yelling at the refs. It's like, I don't care that Jack Nicholson doesn't
Hmm.
like the refs at a Lakers game. Let me watch some basketball.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is all wrapped up in that. But also, so here's the problem though that I want to get to as opposed to just grumbling about the game is, and I'm curious what you think. The problem is the NFL doesn't have to learn a lesson in the same way that now other
Because they're a
people have
monopoly.
well,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. But the bigger problem is like the NBA viewership attendance has been going down for years, and yet the NBA is making more money. Why? Because they don't care about the fans. It's the TV deals. The
Mm.
TV deals are subsidizing them and propping them up. And the merchandising deals, especially, and especially the merchandise they sell internationally, is propping them up. So the product is irrelevant. Well, now that can only last so long before you reach a critical mass and you fall off the cliff. So as an analogy, one of the things I groaned about with the commercials was the new Jurassic Park movie. I didn't even know there was a new one, but these Jurassic World movies have been increasingly awful, and yet everyone has made over $1 billion internationally because the IP sells so well internationally. So they're going to keep making it. Okay, well, uh Disney ran into this problem with their stupid live action remakes, and they're still doing it because the other one that made me groan was the Lilo and Stitch one commercial. And I'm like, why do you keep doing this? Well, they keep doing it because Beauty and the Beast and the Lion King, and I think maybe Aladdin, all made over $1 billion. Well, at some point they hit a cliff, and they have yet to correct because the Little Mermaid and Mufasa, and I don't remember how many other of these stupid live action movies they put out. They have fallen off a cliff and they have not made that much money. In fact, they may have lost money once you account for all the marketing.
Mhm.
Well, same thing with the NBA is eventually going to hit that. And now the NFL, I've talked about how I used to watch every game that was aired in my market because I wanted to watch football. I don't anymore. I only watch the teams I care about. If I think it's an interesting matchup or if it's a team I'm rooting for, because the product has been so watered down, it is not interesting to me. And I don't know how much I believe these numbers, but supposedly, once you account for all of the broadcast plus streaming, this Super Bowl set a ratings record. So the NFL is going to look at, all of these people grumbling about the halftime show. The halftime show wasn't for you guys. It was for how old is your niece? 11, 12? It was for
11.
her. It was for her. It was not for us. That's why you don't have, you know, you were joking about bringing Journey or someone like that, someone that the whole country knows their songs.
Mhm.
That's not the point. The point is the NFL has a contract with Jay-Z's company, and now you bring Apple into it, which is all about streaming, which is all about the youth. That's why you bring in someone like Kendrick Lamar, who I go, huh? But, the 11-year-olds out there go, ooh, is it halftime yet? How many times did she ask how long until halftime? Right?
Mhm.
The halftime show wasn't for you. Well, it's getting to the point where the game isn't for you either.
Mhm.
And that is going to be a problem going forward. You can say, hey, we're doing everything right because look at these numbers. All right, but what are the cracks in the system that you're ignoring?
Well, and that was the thing. We used to have halftime shows, and I approve of this message that were fusion. They were we're gonna have some hip hop, we're gonna have some rock, we're gonna have some country, we're gonna get all these things and kind of do a medley. And
Prince was one of the best ever.
Prince was the best halftime show ever, but
The first
but
one to
but
start
I'm
this though
I
was
was
Michael
thinking
Jackson.
or no, Aerosmith Run DMC
Yeah.
with their collab on Walk This Way, which was the first rock rap collab
Mm-hmm.
that was done. And things like that used to be big. Even the wardrobe malfunction thing was JT and Janet
Janet
Jackson,
Jackson.
but also there were other elements to that whole show. And okay, so my clients say this is the best idea ever, so I'm gonna pitch it here. NFL, if somebody that is a level worker somewhere that can pass this up, a halftime show that's all one hit wonders, doing their one hit. That would be so good.
That'd be cool. That would be cool. But again, it's not about us, so they don't care.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, I've ranted about this with entertainment as well. The BlackRocks of the world are propping up Disney, are
Hmm.
propping up MSNBC, are propping up, so they don't care. They
Well,
don't
it's
care
it's
about the
also
audience because the
it's also
audience isn't the
about the
boss.
message. It's also about the
Yes.
message because what does Kendrick Lamar represent? Hip hop, rap,
Mhm.
right? And for the since it's been consolidated down to the Jay-Z stuff, we have been forced hip hop every halftime show since I
I don't
mean
remember when
Lady Gaga maybe,
I don't
and that's
remember
even
when
pop hip hop.
they
Yeah.
signed that deal with Jay-Z. The NFL signed a deal with Jay-Z. That's why it's all been hip hop because it's all been his company and who he wants to promote. And and then you bring Apple into this where they want the streaming, they want the downloads, and I see on X people posting the numbers after the fact of, hey, all you old people yelling at clouds saying, you know, bring us bring us entertainment we want. They don't care about you because after the week after, or we are still in the week, in the days after, in this week since that show, Kendrick Lamar's album, was it Humble? Is that one of his albums? I know that's one of his songs. Anyway, the album that song is on was number one by far on streams and downloads off of Apple Music. That's what they wanted.
So we made the pedophile richer. Not Kendrick Lamar, Jay-Z, allegedly.
Allegedly. Yeah, yeah. I was thinking that because I had no clue about this
And it just so
beef.
happens this in the same week that his wife won country music artist of the year.
I had no idea about this beef with Drake that Lamar had, and that's what this song was all about. And I had to laugh when I found out because I'm like, aren't there lots of those allegations against your boss, the guy who signs your checks?
Mm-hmm.
So just asking questions here. Um, but while we're on this, I want to shift to I want to talk about the commercials for a second
Okay.
because you said something that was already kind of on my mind, which I find interesting. So the reason the commercials are important is because these big ad agencies get paid. They live or die on what is the cultural zeitgeist. And you have to anticipate it. It's not just what is the cultural zeitgeist, but when you're doing
It's what is it going to be 6 months from now after
exactly,
I filmed this and edited it and
exactly.
rendered it and yeah.
And you especially see that in like one of the few, at least not necessarily funny, but mildly amusing ones was the Matthew McConaughey as all these characters with the Uber Eats. And that was a campaign that they have been running all season long,
Hmm.
right? So you have to anticipate. And if you get it wrong, oh boy, are you Bud Lighted, right? So I found it interesting how little messaging there was. And is that just we're following the dollars, or is that a course correction? Because the
Well, you brought up the key two words, Bud Light. When did that happen versus when were all of these things
mhm.
starting? Yeah.
Well, that's yes. I don't remember exactly when the Dylan Mulvaney stuff was. I think that was at the beginning of last year, because I think it was in the summer of last year that they did the big deal with UFC.
Yeah, I think it was 2023 sometime.
Oh, was it
Yeah.
farther back? Okay. But see, I'm still annoyed by that, because I appreciate that your course correction. I still think in order for there to be actual cultural change, there needs to be acknowledgement that you done effed up.
Well, but this is behavioral modification 101, right? So you have to punish bad behavior,
Hmm.
but you actually get better results by encouraging good behavior.
Hmm.
So when they do something right, this is a slippery slope because when you're dealing with narcissistic personalities, they take advantage of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So what you have to do is you have to encourage the good behavior, but always be it's the forgive but never forget mentality. And
You know what?
I
That's a
think
good
we
answer to the
overpreach
question. Yeah.
I think we overpreach the forgive and forget. No, forgive but never forget. It's not holding
Mhm.
a grudge to remember you wronged me multiple
Yeah.
times. It's a grudge if you just remember the one wrong and you hold it against them the whole time.
As opposed to, I mean, essentially what you're saying is, look, I don't need you to repent, if you will, but I'm going to remember this bad behavior
Hmm. And if you
because
start going down that slope again, we're going to be
we're gonna
double hard on you. Yeah.
we're gonna slap you back down. So it's not realistic to expect that people are going to acknowledge, yeah, we done effed up. But they are acknowledging it with their action, because I think the Budweiser one is a good illustration of this, because you had the classic Americana nostalgia with the Budweiser ads with the Clydesdales.
Hmm.
And then it's not just the Dylan Mulvaney stuff, but remember what went viral after that was the silly white liberal woman, sorry, white progressive woman who was in charge of this ad campaign. And she was on video doing an interview saying, our customer base is too frat bro, and we don't like that.
Yeah. It was the direct hate on their own customers. Yeah.
So what are the Bud Light commercials? Well, the Bud Light commercials are the other side of that coin of Shane Gillis, and I don't even know who the dude with all the tattoos are, and Peyton Manning, and hey bro, hey sports bros, no, we got your back. You
Hmm.
know, we're still for you. We're the beer for you. So come on, look, we love you. Look how much fun we're having. We're broing it up. Although those Shane Gillis commercials are hilarious sports bro commercials.
Hmm.
You know, it's what the Bud Light commercials going all the way back to the Was Up guys, you know. That's what that used to be. And they weren't afraid, they weren't ashamed of their customer base. So I like your point that, hey, don't forget, because they may do this again.
Hmm.
If the pressure gets to them, or the ideologues get in
If
place.
anybody wants a perfect example of this, do we still bust Germany's balls about 1940? Right? No.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like, hey, don't do that again. You know.
If so, I'm in trouble because I married a German woman, but you know.
Yeah. Well, I had a thought about Germany too, but let me finish this thought. Um the Jeep commercial was the only other one that stood out to me, because it was
The
both really
seal
good.
commercial was pretty crazy.
The Seal commercial was trippy.
Yeah.
So that one stood out because it was funny. Um, the Jeep commercial with Harrison Ford was both brilliant because of the line of, you know, I'm a Ford, but I drive a Jeep. That was great. But then all of the lead up to all of that was the imagery and the lines were all classic Americana. You know, we are, for all of our differences, what matter are our shared ideals and our shared history, celebrating that. But on the other hand, speaking of the messaging, you still have a few companies doubling down.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, to me, this was hilarious because in the lead up, I remember in the week leading up to the Super Bowl last week, the left losing its mind because they were going to take the end racism off the end zones, and the right shouting "Yay victory!" But then they come out with one of the worst ads slapping you in the face with the message, which was the girls' flag football one.
Was I doing something during that one? I don't remember that one.
Yeah, you may have gotten up during that, but that was one of those that there was kind of a build up to it. Like there were a couple of small commercials, and then I think I think you had gotten up to do something before the halftime show because it was the big commercial. I think was during halftime, right before the halftime show, and it was essentially, you know, this ridiculous, flag football girls beating down the varsity jerks,
Mm.
the actual varsity team, and they're cloaking it in this guise of yay women's sports because the NFL is putting its money and its influence behind this drive to get flag football a varsity sport for girls in all 50
Mm-hmm.
states. Okay, but you're selling it with that same girl power message that we're all sick of
Mm.
and has been
Okay, I
over
see
the
what you're
top for
saying.
so
Yeah.
long. Nike did the same thing. Nike did the girl power ad. The only concession they made to the current shift, and uh oh, what's her name? I just brain farted on the swimmer. Riley Gaines made this point on X about it is that congratulations for not putting in any trans athletes in your ad, Nike. It's glad to see you've grown, but that was still duplicitous crap. Because you don't actually support women's sports because you have been on the other side of this
Mhm.
tranny madness for years, and you're doubling down on the thing that is having Marvel lose money and having to course correct, which is
And
the girl boss crap.
and as even Martina Navratilova had to admit, this came out of it. Can this guy not get a photo op out of anything?
Yep.
For those that are just listening, it's Trump with all the girls around while he signed his executive order about trans females, biological males being in female sports.
And not a single sniffed head.
Yeah, that's he'll stiff that. But I mean, he got shot in the head,
Mm-hmm.
and the best photo of 2024. And he does women's sports, and he just became the most feminist president ever
Mm-hmm.
by signing this. And I'm talking feminism from first and second wave, not what is currently there where men are women. But
I so I to your point about forgive but don't forget is, yeah, let's not forgive or forget because the NFL is still woke. They're just and even though he in the same week that people were freaking out about the end racism coming off, Goodell came out and said we're expanding our DEI policies. We're expanding our DEI offices. So they're doubling down, and it's only going to continue to affect the product. Same thing with Nike. And again, back to my rant is because the customer isn't actually the customer. Nike can continue to be duplicitous and evil because they get so much money from their overseas sales.
mhm.
You don't matter.
Well, this is the Mark Cuban discussion. Everybody keeps
Mm.
arguing with Mark Cuban about DEI stuff. and nobody calls him on it except for the guy whose voice never gets raised because I have like, what do we have, like 50 people on Twitter followers, is he gets more money from China
Hmm.
than he does from US audiences. That's why he's saying all these things and doing all these things. And they're like, well, your argument doesn't make sense. And I'm like, okay, logic arguments have many forms. And in this case, you can say, oh, well, because he will lose half of his money if he speaks out against China. That's why, what was the guy, the NBA player that got blacklisted? Kemper?
Um,
No, start with a K.
yeah, he was a Turkish guy,
Yeah.
and I'm drawing a blank because I think he changed his name when he became a U.S. citizen. And so I keep wanting to say Meta World Peace, but no, that was a totally different guy who
No, that was
changed
our
his name.
test. That was our test.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm drawing a blank on his name,
Meta
but
World
then,
Peace, the guy for the most famous NBA brawl ever. You know,
mhm.
no,
um,
I think it's Kemper.
Cantor? No,
Cantor.
that's a
Cantor. Yes, you're right. No, you're right. Cantor.
okay.
Yeah. And he was on Trigger talking about this. Which we'll get to Trigger. We need to kind of like transition at some point.
Yep, yep. Well, uh,
But okay, so
let no,
to the
let's
point of that, he was blacklisted from the NBA because he spoke out because of the Uyghurs in China. Because
yes,
he was from
yes,
Turkey and he was Islamic, which the Uyghurs are Muslims in China, and so he spoke up, and all of a sudden they would not play a game where he was playing. And so the team benched him, even though if you look statistically, he was one of the best players on the court, but his team was benching him. This is the opposite of Kaepernick, right?
hmm,
Where he was playing bad, he got benched, and then he did activism. This guy, oh, he wore sneakers.
yes.
Yes. And he wore
Ennis
sneakers that had
Cantor,
his, yeah.
who when he became a citizen, changed his name to Ennis Cantor Freedom.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, Same thing with the Houston Rockets owner. Made a very safe kind of vanilla, but still a tweet in support of the Hong Kong pro-democracy protests, and the NBA lost its mind, including,
Current owner or recently
I
sold?
think he may have been pressured to sell after this.
Because currently it's Fertitta, Tillman
And I
Fertitta.
can't remember if he
Yeah.
was a majority owner or a minority owner. Um, but he made a tweet in support of the Hong Kong pro-democracy protests, and he got, well, here's our transition is um we're going to go revisit our shame and guilt conversation because Candace Warbuck was on Trigonometry here a few weeks ago, and as always, a very interesting conversation with those guys because they're very good at asking questions and then asking follow-up questions to really get a good conversation. And I think she always has interesting things to say about sex and relationships and whatnot. Um, I One of my problems with her that's been bubbling around in my head, I was trying to get a handle on, is she overuses and over criticizes shame,
Hmm.
because shame, especially societally, culturally, is important. I mean, what are we talking about here with Budweiser versus Nike? It's shame. You are immune to our shame because you're not really part of our culture. Budweiser sells a lot of product in the US. It doesn't really sell it elsewhere. I think they're starting to crack into the Asian market a little bit, but otherwise, their other brands that they sell internationally are because they acquired international brands,
Hmm.
right?
Well,
Uh,
Bush is owned by InBev. I think it's InBev,
yes, yes,
and they own
or they,
almost everything. That's why the boycotts were so hard because
yes,
people were like, "Here's the list of
yep.
150 things you can't drink now." Like
I think,
Ziegenbach, we bought Ziegenbachs the other day.
mhm.
That's Anheuser-Busch.
And it's just recently been acquired by Anheuser-Busch. Yeah.
No, no, no. It was Anheuser-Busch.
Oh, I
They
thought they got it
no,
just
we
Carbach a
were
few
having
years ago.
we were having trouble finding it because now Ziegenbach is put through Karbach because
Oh,
Anheuser-Busch
they just
and InBev
shifted.
bought
Okay.
Karbach, and now their Ziegenbach is through Karbach. So it wasn't with all the Bud Lights and everything, even though I knew a possible guest was going to like that one. So we had to find it in a new place, which was near all these other things. So it's very complicated. But one of the ones, Modelo, because Anheuser-Busch and InBev were so big, there was a monopoly issue. So Modelo here in the States is not Anheuser-Busch. But Modelo, when you buy it anywhere else in the world, is,
Mm-hmm.
because they're not allowed to sell another, because I think they also have Corona or something, and Tecate and all these other brands. So it was like you can't have a corner on the Mexican beer market. So you can't own Modelo that sold here. So Modelo that sold here is a different company, but Modelo sold around the world is Anheuser-Busch.
Yeah.
So it's a
The
very complicated system. Yeah.
the point being that shame can be important because it can bring pressure to bear to change bad behavior. Now, it can be abused in the same way they talk about basically pretty privilege, that, you know, a beautiful woman is going, or a beautiful person is going to have an easier time in a lot of ways. And look, you can take that as just an asset, a trait that you have, and use it productively, or you can use it to be, you know, if you're a guy, a skeevy player, or a girl, a controlling bitch. You know,
Well, yeah,
it's,
yeah. I almost started a discussion that would be a whole hour episode. So I'm gonna refrain from my comment that I was about to make.
but the point being, my one of my problems with the way she criticizes shame is that shame can be good. Shame should be good. Okay. You know, my personal analogy is I I got stuck on a road that I hate because I missed my exit because it was rainy and lots of traffic by the time I got back to Dallas when I was driving back uh, from Houston on Monday. And I could have been that a-hole who hits the brakes and cuts over 4 lanes of traffic to barely, you know, miss the crash barrels and take my exit because, oh, that's my exit, gotta go. Everyone, if I had done that, should have laid on the horn and given me the double-barreled salute, and I would have deserved it. Why? Because that person needs to be shamed. And if you are a decent person, you should feel shame, because not only was that not a good thing to do, that was a dangerous thing for you to do personally and societally. You
Mhm.
should feel shame when you do something like that, and you should be shamed when you do something like that, because that wasn't a good thing.
Yeah, and I think this is where I probably, yeah, if we were to put Candace in a spectrum of opinion, she's probably sitting right on that line that's between the two of us right now.
Mm-hmm.
And where like you said, healthy shame is a good thing, but all too often, especially since social media became a thing, it has been used as a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
A gun is a good thing if I need to hunt for my food, if I need to protect my home, if all of these reasons why the Second Amendment exists, right? But if I use it to get my way, like I walk into a bank to get money with it,
Mm-hmm.
it is a bad thing. And I think somewhere in her dialogue, because we both listened to this, but I think somewhere in her dialogue, you're going to see it's the fact that it's used as a weapon is the problem. And yeah, yeah, a healthy weapon, your horn when someone cuts you off in traffic, versus just honking on your horn because someone exists on the road, are two different things. Which you see people tailgating because you're not going fast enough for me. So yeah, let's go ahead and play the clip. It actually starts with a friend zone comment, which I think I have some comments about. But yeah, let's start with the clip and then we'll go from there. Share with sound.
There's
We
something
did
that
it
I
right
want to
this
talk
time.
about, which
We
is
learn.
because we're talking about that, and that's really interesting. And then there's this thing called the friend zone. And you can you get lots of content now about men being too nice in particular. What does that actually mean?
I just think it's attraction. I think that's a secret sauce that no one knows. Like, why do you fall in love with the people that you do? Why are you attracted to the person that you are? I don't think anyone has figured that out. So, women get the
I have.
ick very easily.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've heard of that. I don't think anyone's ever come back from the ick. So once that happens,
Pause it a
it's
second.
over.
So how do you give
Okay.
Is it here or later? Was it earlier where she referenced the t-shirt study? Which I think you've brought up before way back. So for anyone who doesn't know, there was this university study where they had guys wear the same t-shirt for 3 days to imprint their pheromones, their scent on it. And then they had women smell the t-shirt and without seeing the male rate the level of attractiveness based on his scent.
I'm trying to remember if I referenced that one or not, because there's another one that's similar, which was stress related sweat versus exercise related sweat on the t-shirts. And the women were more attracted to the exercise related sweat. So I can't remember which one I referenced before, but yeah, the pheromones. So this is, let me go ahead and bring it back to us for a second. She said, we don't know what causes this. And I think, okay, so I don't know, but
Right.
I have a lot of I thinks that are based on a lot of biological facts. Part of it is timing. Are the two human beings in the same hormonal state at the exact time? I mean, I had a woman that I dated for a little bit. I looked at her before we were doing anything like romantic together. I looked at her and she goes, "You just looked at me like this." And I'm like, "I just looked at you." But now I do feel that way. And it was just like the two hormonal pathways were exactly, and there is nothing in our dating history that we've never dated somebody that looked exactly like each other. So it's not like, oh, well, you're just attracted to this one physical feature or whatever. And so, but it was, I hadn't in a while. And I guess she was in the same state at the moment. And we just made eye contact. And you brought up pheromones. Those, we don't we don't register things that are affecting us. And things as small as pheromones. I mean, COVID was a good example, right? You're just in the room with somebody. That's why the masks were ridiculous, because you just being in the room with somebody was the virus. And that's what we deal with all the time with all kinds of things. So,
well, the point about nobody knows, it's nobody knows the answer because there isn't the answer. There are answers because what you're dealing with is an incredibly complex system, which we've ranted about before. Is
well, and a complex system beyond our senses. So like we talk about atoms, right? Like, atoms make up this. There's protons and neutrons and electrons. Unless you have an atomic microscope, you know the concept, but you don't know exactly what every atom is doing in your body at any given time.
So let's stay on the friend zone for a second here, because she's about to get to the ick, which I want to talk about. But before, since she started with friend zone, the other thought I had about friend zone, I want to go back to something she said at the very beginning of this episode that I had an issue with, because
well, let me finish my thought on that real quick, and then I can close my loop, and then you can open the new loop. We don't have sensory information that says we know, but where timing is important is you hear those responses, which is, "Oh, I wish I could find a guy like you," and the guy is like, "Oh, I've been here the whole time," but you've been there at the wrong time. And the things that make you a good partner are evident, but the things that cause the attraction were poorly timed.
That's essentially what she's talking about in a little bit when she gets into the concept of all day foreplay, of why that is a thing, how that works, why that works, what that means. That's essentially what she's saying, you know, with that is.
And that closed my loop, so you can go wherever direction you were going. Yeah.
All right. So one of the things I had a problem with that she talked about early on is, to her credit, she points out, look, I was in the adult film industry and I was able to make that separation of, you know, performative sexual act versus intimate sexual act, and it didn't bother me. And I'm a physically and mentally healthy person now, still. Most women cannot do that. That is not your thing. Stop pretending it is. Stop listening to people who say you can have sex just like a man and be happy and healthy. Most of you, most of the time, cannot. But then she cites this study that kind of showed that, but not really, which was essentially they showed a picture of an attractive person and said, would you have a one night stand with this? Would you consider having a one night stand with this person? And for the guys, it's the comedian Ron White has a bit of, well, you know, the thing about titties is once you've seen one pair, you
kind of want to see them
want to
all.
see them all. Yeah.
She could be 80 years old at the biker rally and say, you want to see my titties? And say, yep, roll
Nope.
them out. Okay, you can roll them back
Roll
up.
them back up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the guy brain. Is the guy brain is the lizard brain, caveman brain gonna say, ooh, attractive woman, me want mate, right? And women say no. And she points out that the problem with that is that it doesn't take into account the stability and safety aspect that women inherently intuitively need. So what the second part of the study was to show them a friend that they found physically attractive, but had not had any intimate involvement with. And she says, see, because they feel safe and secure with that person, they would have a one night stand with them. Hold on a second. Because I suspect that if you ask the right questions, what you would get out of that woman for most of them isn't that, or just that, or even primarily that I feel safe with that person. It's because they are someone I am at least friendly with, if not a friend, there's the potential for a there.
Yeah, except there's a carryover to the safety part of it. Why is someone that's 6'4" and attractive and athletic more likely to get the one night stand when they walk in the bar? You know the people I'm talking about, because being 6'4" and athletic is a sign of safety.
Mm-hmm.
This person can protect me. So yeah, safety is a huge thing.
But my point is, I feel like she contradicted herself, or at least didn't flesh out the argument, because I think she was trying to say essentially that women can have casual sex. We just approach it or think about it differently because we need safety and stability. My point is, no, I think for most women, most of the time, it's not exactly a casual sexual encounter, because I think most women are thinking or hoping that that will lead to a relationship, that I am willing to have a casual sexual encounter with this person because I'm thinking or hoping it could lead to a non-casual relationship.
Well, we see that in the affair numbers, right? So men will have affairs and end the affair and try to keep their marriage. Whereas typically the typical behavior is when a woman has an affair, she's in a process of mate swapping.
She's already halfway out the door or more.
Yeah. So yeah, we see it in all kinds of arenas. So you are correct there, but that safety element is huge. And I think it's one of those things, just like the pheromones we talked about, is under the surface and you can't feel it. Because, okay, so go back to my 6'4" attractive, looks like he should be on The Bachelor guy. There's safety signals there. I am safe with this guy because he can protect me from other people, the barbarians at the gate, right? So that signal is there, but they also know this guy gets any woman he wants. When he walks in here, he's going to sleep with me and leave. But then they still do it, and the next day be like, why are you leaving? So the safety signal is there. It's just more subtle than I think she talks about.
This is where I think there's a problem with how she shames shaming. Because the reason you shame promiscuous behavior is because, honey, he's just not that into you. He's a guy. He's, you know, he's in that research study of they just showed him your picture and he said, yeah, that's pretty. I'd hit that. That's the guy. The reason you shame that behavior is because it is ultimately most of the time self-destructive. You're listening to that lizard brain signal in the same way that the guy is listening to the lizard brain signal going, ooh, pretty woman, me want mate. And neither of those two are ultimately healthy in the long term. It's, oh, why is he leaving? Because he was almost always going to leave.
Mm-hmm.
So
you
don't
barely made the cut for him to be there.
yes,
It's just,
yes. It's, you know, it is the reason there is the old adage, don't give away the milk for free, because that is a thing, because that works, because that's how guys think, because that's how guys instinctively react if you're only going to appeal to their base instincts.
and it's funny how this plays across the sexes, because when it comes to slut shaming, women do it.
Mhm.
You and I don't do it. I mean, the guys that are going out trying to get laid are going to be the opposite of slut shaming because they want it.
Mhm.
But us men, we simp shame.
Mhm.
The guys who give all the money for nothing, right? All the resources for nothing. And this is where the friend zone comes in. You gave all that emotional support for nothing. And eventually it's, I can get this from you. Why do I give the other resource when I already get it from you? And again, subconsciously, she's not doing it out of evil nature, but you set yourself up for that. The old adage, you teach people how to treat you. And
So this is a good segue back to the clip, because to me, this circles back and leads into the ick, because we've talked about this before of one of the reasons you might be in the friend zone is because you're being inauthentic. That you are trying to be the nice guy rather than being a nice guy who is just yourself.
okay, so we'll listen to some more, but I have an alternate hypothesis.
So you're essentially, as she's about to explain with the ick, you're giving off nonverbal cues that I shouldn't get too involved. I shouldn't get too intimate with this person because they're not authentic.
Woman the ick. What's
It's
the easiest
anything.
one?
It's
Oh,
anything.
man.
It can be
This
anything.
is
I'm so
Can you
sorry.
see why it's easier to be gay?
yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
I do.
And they're called gay because they're happy.
Exactly. No, they deal with a lot less
So
bullshit.
it's anything.
It could be the way that your fingernails are clipped. It could be the way that you pick up your tea. It could be the way that you bend down to pick up something. Everyone is different.
Candice, you know I'm going to say something that's going to sound...
Oops. All right. So I knew someone who broke up with a guy that because he during one lunch had a little salad dressing on his lip.
What Kissin was going to say there is that's not fair. This doesn't even apply to me because I'm happily married, but that's not fair. But it's not fair, but it's true, and it's as she explains. This is the female superpower, okay? Because you are um uh, coalitional instead of hierarchical. This is why you are so good intuitively at reading nonverbals. Don't ignore that.
Well, but also it plays to negativity bias because they carried more risk when it comes to
Yes.
sexual activity, right? So
Yeah, yes. This is why even people on the left, people you would think would be aligned with the former adult actress who is, you know, championing more open and honest relationships and sexuality and blah blah blah, things that we on the Christian conservative side wouldn't agree with, and yet she's on our side, quote unquote, because the left hates her because she says things like we're smaller and weaker. Yeah, yeah. This is why I have long been a snarky troll when it comes to super pro gun control people, and I asked them, why are you anti-woman?
Yeah, so here's alternate hypothesis on the ick and friend zones. Uh, there's a phenomenon where you're raised together, so you may be unrelated, like siblings, right? At a certain age, and you're basically not able to be attracted to them because you were raised together during this developmental period. I wonder if timing plays into this in a way that you developed a relationship together, friends, before the romance.
Mhm.
And so now the romance is impossible because you're like siblings.
There's an interesting thought. Yeah.
Yeah, so you automatically get the ick from the friend who is in the friend zone that is wondering why you can't be attracted to me, even though I check every box you vent to me about from your boyfriends or your girlfriends or whatever, because basically you're like a brother to me.
That's an interesting thought and makes a lot of sense with something that I have kind of ranted about, but should step back from, which is I have never understood I can't have a relationship with this person because they're my friend, because I have long said my wife is my best friend and vice versa. But to your point, the friendship and the intimacy developed at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had 20 plus years of that. That is different from, you know, like Mahomes, we were just ranting about him. He is something of an oddball because his wife is a childhood friend. And they were friends first before they started dating in high school. And that is very rare. And perhaps it is because, to your point, that would be weird. There's something subconscious there about this is too close a relationship. In fact, but maybe the reason it works there is because when she talked about the shirt smelling study, something she mentioned is that in that particular study, what they found is that the men that were rated the highest in attraction was were men who were the most genetically different from the female.
Yep.
And Brittany Mahomes is this little blonde white girl, and Patrick Mahomes is this half black guy. They're very genetically different. So maybe that's one of the reasons it worked, and she overcame what is usually the friend zone, which, to your point, might be because there's a subconscious block there.
There's also that he was the star football player and continues to be, as an adult, the star football player. So there's also there are things that overcome hurdles. Yeah, hurdles are there as a deterrent. They're not there as a complete no.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, but also he kept at it.
Yeah.
Even when they went to separate colleges, he didn't give up on the idea of a relationship with her, which is important. He kept at it because you made this point when we were talking about it, and that we wanted to talk about this is the ick and the friend zone is a barrier, but it is not necessarily an insurmountable barrier. Because she makes the point that you don't recover from the ick, and well, you probably don't recover from the ick, but you've had experiences personally or witnessed. No, you can. It's just difficult.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because I was talking about one gal that I wouldn't call it dating. It was like kind of a one night stand ish, more than 1 days of kind of being friends after. But her words to me, like 2 hours into the conversation, was, I didn't think I would like you at first, and I'm like, but you still approached me. And it was because she is the one that approached me in that situation. And like, yeah, so you can overcome it. There was something about me that she was like, I'm not going to like you. But through 2 hours of conversation, she liked me enough to go home with me, so it's obviously it is overcomable. Now, one of the problems with a long-term relationship, though, is you have so the friend zone, to keep going back to that, is you have the risk, because you can get an ick from a romantic relationship.
Mm.
And the ick from a romantic relationship is a deal breaker. And so you might be giving up a longtime friend
Oh, okay,
for
put a
one night of fun.
put a pin in that, because I've got I have thoughts on the ick and how you can get into it. But the other point I wanted to make about the ick, though, is this is why it's important to understand these sex differences, because I talked about how women, this is your superpower, don't ignore it, use it. You might be wrong, but to Candace's point, you're smaller and weaker, better better that you miss out on a potential, connection there than something terrible happens to you, right? So err on the side of caution, listen to that voice. Guys, our superpower used to be that we weren't so damn neurotic that and I put myself in this camp of this is absolutely a problem I have, but we've talked before about how fighting on the playground and then in the next day we're friends again.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're guys, because that's how our brain works, is okay, thing happened, now we move on from the thing. And I don't remember who I heard say this. He was someone, I don't know if it was Williamson or who, but it was someone in that space of the guy space, the manosphere, if you will, of don't be afraid to shoot your shot, guys, because no means no right now. And we used to be, hey, you want to go out sometimes, no, all right, on to the next one. Because look, for whatever reason, you gave that girl the ick. Timing, pheromones, mental space, who the heck knows?
Salad dressing on your lip.
Yes, and okay, all of the above, whatever. But the next one, no, the timing lines up, the pheromones lines up, the jeez. We have a mutual friend who was set up with someone, and we all laughed about this. Was set up with someone and then was told, there, you might want to be careful because she's had discipline problems in the past. What kind of discipline problems? Well, she tried to stab a guy. That wasn't the deal breaker. The deal breaker was when he found out she was a smoker. Okay. You know what? Different things trigger different people. So again, for whatever reason, you gave that particular individual the ick. But to the point earlier, right now, it doesn't. Yeah. I mean, if you really think there's a there and you really like that person, give it some space, but don't be afraid to shoot your shot again, whether with the same person or with someone else, because that is our superpower, is to be able to be in the moment.
Well, you may have hit on something that it progressed my thought a little bit. Motivation is also important, and when guys want to be in a relationship versus when women want to be in a relationship versus when guys want to have sex versus when women want to have sex, right? So if I'm going to make a move at a longtime friend, I am probably looking for a life partner. The girl who is probably looking to give the friend a chance is probably looking for get under somebody to get over somebody. And so you're in two different emotional states at that point, right? So the guy can hit it and quit it most of the time, but when they're looking for that partner they're going to have babies with, they're probably going to look for the friend. They're probably going to try to have that relationship going into it. Whereas the woman can hit it and quit it, but they can't do it with somebody they have a relationship with. And I think that's where Candace is wrong. That safety is there, the comfort is there, but at the same time, you need to have the same motivational state at that exact time, which is why this world we live in, where opportunities are boundless with people you don't even know, is effing everybody over, because you're going into a situation and trying to evaluate somebody's motivational state over some drinks, which clouds the situation, in a couple hours with somebody you're probably hugely physically attracted to in an emotional state where you're ready to have sex. Everything just goes through, and you have women wondering why no guys stick around and where all the good guys at, and you've got guys becoming psychopathic because they can get it whenever they want, and then you've got a big giant cohort of guys that are being left behind because they're not 6'4" when they walk in the room. And so we're basically shooting our foot in every direction possible when it comes to relationships.
And this is a point that I think, again, she either gets wrong or overlooks early on, is this is the hiccup, this is the problem with my statement of, guys, don't be afraid to shoot your shot, is that women be crazy, yo. And I was explaining this.
Let me put that a little bit more mild. They are higher in a little bit of neuroticism, but their emotional state is a little bit more volatile than
And I was
males.
explaining
And-
this to a nephew over Christmas because he was talking about this.
because they are the smaller sex and they're in more danger of everything. So
And I said, everyone else will want to get out of the kitchen, especially my wife, because she's tired of hearing me say this, because ever since you pointed this out, I'm hung up on it because I think, oh gosh, this explains so much of, no, nephew, it's not that she's crazy, it is that she's different. And I gave the very brief hierarchy versus coalition speech. What I didn't go into, though, because I didn't want to start a big fight, but also because I didn't want to hurt his poor teenage brain, is that the problem with that is toxic femininity. And most femininity now, almost all that we have been teaching and preaching in education, in pop culture, is toxic. Okay. And so that creates an added pressure for, Francis and Constantine's reaction to the ick is hilarious because, as Cousin says, that's not fair. And, Francis, this is why it's easier to be gay. And yeah, okay. But it shouldn't be. It should just be a, hey, we're different. Let's try and work around our differences. Where it becomes unfair is, so earlier on, she talks about how, and again, this is where I have a problem with her shaming shame culture, is the overuse of the word. I understand where she's coming from when it's used as a cudgel, but one of the things she lumps into that early on in the discussion is she cites a number of something like 70% of even married couples are afraid to be completely open and honest about their fantasies, sexual fantasies and desires with their partner. Okay, well, there's a couple things there. First of all, just because you are uncomfortable talking about something doesn't mean it's because of shame necessarily. It's an uncomfortable topic. It's a intimate topic.
But that's a chicken or egg argument. Is it uncomfortable because of shame, or is it just uncomfortable inherently? Because shame can be inherent. We are sensitive to it for reasons, right? Because we're social animals, right? So I think that we're splitting hairs on that.
I don't think so, because I think when you're talking about something as intimate and personal as sex and sexual desires and sexual fantasies, especially, that is a very extreme vulnerability. Especially for women, but even
also
for guys,
it's an investment thing too. Right, because you're in a long say you're married for 15 years, and
hold on, I have an anecdote. This is where I was going with that. Okay.
Oh, I was going to say, because for those that don't know, I have an aversion to feet. I have the opposite of a foot fetish. so like 15 years into a relationship, my wife says, "Hey, I want you to suck my toes." I would be like, yeah, and so that would be something that could end up ending a relationship, right? Where she's like, "I'm going to divorce you if you don't suck my toes." That is where I was going with the women about. Yeah,
with the women be crazy part, though. Is
okay, I need a personal anecdote. I made up a made up story. I'm not. It's not that I'm not averse to feet, but it's
I told you this months ago when I was down there and we were talking. I couldn't remember the details, so when I got back, I asked my wife, "Hey, what was that thing you told me?" And because we had gotten on to your forever rant about suburban white women, wealthy suburban white women and their first world problems. And so my wife rarely comments on any of these, but she is on some of these local moms groups on Facebook.
Oh, they're the
And
worst.
some of the stuff that gets posted on there, oy vey. And there was one in particular that she was just, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. Are people really like this? And I'm like, yeah, people are like that. And I try not to go into the especially modern wealthy women. So the post was about a woman whose husband had recently revealed, I don't even know if you would call it a fetish or a kink. It's just he wanted to paint his fingernails and toenails.
Hmm. That's
And
pretty mild as things go. Yeah.
and pretty mild. And this was, I think they'd been married around 10 years and had 2 kids. And this woman's comment was, I feel like I don't even know this person. And I'm thinking about talking to her divorce lawyer. Am I overreacting? That was bad enough to make my wife go, what the heck? But then all of the people who were absolutely not, you go girl, this is weird. And I'm like, and you wonder why guys bottle things up. Okay, especially around modern women.
And this is part of modern society too, because one thing you have to, let me just put my rant out. One thing you have to understand about middle-class suburban women is they're looking for every excuse to get a divorce already.
Yeah.
In general, not any specific people, but in general. Yeah. It just seems like, well, Mary Harrington is great on this when she talks about the modern marriage based on romance is a very modern thing.
Mhm.
And since it's based on that, I'm sorry, guys, romance is something that's hard to maintain
Oh yeah.
over the course of your lifetime. For Valentine's Day, when you're 3 years in a relationship, no problem. Some flowers, some good music, and, some mood, go with it. But 20 years in, the kids are grown, all of life stress, you're all aged, you're not as attractive as you used to be on both sides. Yeah, it's not something that you can bank the rest of your life on. It has to be a partnership. We talked about this in the episode of why we buck the trend when it comes to relationships. But since that has been the thing, you look at suburban women, they're basically trying to find happiness from external sources at all times. And that's not a good recipe for being happy. In fact, I have the study over here. Mauss is the author, Mauss. And it was people who prioritize happiness are the least happy people. And that's your suburban middle-class wife. And they're looking for an excuse to get divorced. And all those people that were piling on with you go girl are wishing they had something to hang their hat on when it comes to that.
Mm-hmm. And this is where the ick really becomes unfair, is because you
Because
can
it doesn't just
ruin,
happen early.
you can ruin
Yeah.
a relationship,
Mhm.
like a serious relationship, 10 years, 2 kids, and now all of a sudden you let out of the closet that you have this desire to paint your nails, and your wife of 10 years and 2 kids is thinking about going to get a divorce lawyer, and she's being encouraged by her fellow suburban nitwits. That is toxic femininity. That is absolutely toxic.
So let's go back to the basis of this, and we'll probably have to wrap it up after that, is shame. The people that were encouraging her is the opposite of shame, right? Where what could have been a different response would be the community being like, wow, this is
You
pretty
are being a
minor.
selfish, very selfish. See you next Tuesday. How about you rein it in, honey, and actually
Yeah.
have a discussion with your husband?
and have a discussion in a way of, hey, okay, in private, but not in public, because it would be weird. You could have a compromise in this thing.
That would be weird to me, and it would be embarrassing. Please don't do that in public,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, no, you're not allowed to go to the school board meetings because I know what you would say. You can sit and watch it at home online with me. Fine, dear. And she's right. So
But you're saying healthy shame versus what's
yeah.
going on, but also the opposite of that, healthy. There's a healthy version of not coming after somebody, but there's also a toxic version of encouraging what is bad behavior, ending a 10-year relationship with children because of a very minor issue.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
and then the confidence on the other side of that for the person to come out, and I'm just saying the person because this could be something the wife said too, and the guy bail, right?
Yeah.
So something I have the confidence to say, okay, I actually have this feeling inside. Guys crying is a big one, right? So guys crying, if you cry at a bad time in a very delicate part of your relationship, your wife is leaving. I'm sorry. But if you cry over a major thing at the right time, where she is there to comfort you and help you, and then you come out of it stronger, that's healthy, right? So the
Mhm.
same behavior can be healthy or unhealthy in a relationship. Now, if you are in a relationship where you can't trust that female to allow you to cry in that healthy part of the relationship where it would have been beneficial, you're going to hold it.
Mhm.
And we got a Dax video out of it, right? So
Yeah.
you're going to hold it, and this is probably where most male suicide comes from, because it's guys our age, mid-40s, that have had a hard time come upon them that makes them feel like less of a man. It's usually a middle-aged man that lost their job is where most suicides come from.
Hmm.
And if I lose my livelihood and I can't cry to my wife and then go get back on my feet comfortably, I am never back on my feet.
Mhm.
And so, but at the same time, if I'm a whiny little puss about everything, well, she should leave me. Okay. So yeah, but that little bit of shame is very debilitating if you can't trust your partner. So I think maybe the bottom of this, the foundation of this is trust.
Absolutely. I mean, we have brought up the term before, and you know, the macro down to the micro, a low trust society is very, very bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you want a high
See,
trust
in
society,
1984, his neighbor with the way their family was, where they couldn't trust the kids to not turn them in, but then the
Mhm.
wife would encourage the kids to rat out the dad or
Mhm.
whatever. Yeah, so it's
Yeah, and the dad is in the gulag, like, because he's such a true believer, or wants to be, or prove that he is. He's praising his children for turning him in because that was the right thing to do. And
mhm.
it's and the Orwell's writing from example, writing from anecdote, writing from, no, this is stuff that actually happened, and it got worse after he wrote that
Mhm.
book even. Um, and so if you want a high trust society, then start on the personal level, start on the small level of, you and your friend group, you and your, intimate partner group, what, in those small interactions, you need to be able to have enough trust to be open. Because a high trust society is also an open society, because we trust that you aren't going to destroy me for this thing I said or did. Even
Well,
if it was wrong, you will correct me, you might shame me, but you will not destroy me.
and part of it is a snowball thing, because your own honesty is dependent on trusting someone else that you can be honest with them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that will be all for today
So
then.
yeah, speaking of honesty, we didn't get to Fauci, but
Yeah. Oh, I want to go down some rabbit holes on that though. So we may drop in with receipts next time. But next social time, but next time we'll get back to Wheel of Time. I wanted some more time because there's some interesting things that Peterson has said about Nietzsche, who is, and we've made this reference before, that Ishii is the guy who only read the first half of Nietzsche. And so because Nietzsche is unfortunately kind of the father of nihilism in modern society when he shouldn't be. It's just
Yeah.
people only read the
Well,
first half.
To quote Douglas Murray, it's not whether you like Nietzsche or not that is a judge of your character. It's what parts of Nietzsche that you like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get into Nietzsche and nihilism, and where Elon the philosopher went down the dark roads versus Louis Theron Rand and cynicism and the Stoics. I wanted to bring that in, kind of where the cynicism comes from, the Stoics, and where a healthy amount of that is good and necessary.
Okay.
And so we're going to go down those roads and contrast how, Louis Theron didn't fall from the light. In fact, was reinvigorated because of that depth of understanding, that portion of wisdom that he had, versus I'm in a deep dark hole and I like it here and I'm just going to keep digging, which is,
Well, no, you can't say that because he didn't like it there because he wanted it all to end.
I'm going to keep digging until I find oblivion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
All right,
we will do that next time.
Put your comments, share, like, subscribe, whatever. We're at 68. We were at 67 for like a year, and we're at 68. So
We just need one more to be perfect.
exactly. We're just old men ranting in the clouds, and we'll see you next time.